If you are a coffee lover like I am, you have inevitably settled in for a cup of coffee and instantly wondered what in the world could have gone so wrong. Luckily, science has the answer, and that answer can help you brew the best possible cup at home. And tea drinkers, don't click away. The information in here will also fit you to a T. This is Minute Food. Good coffee depends on a whole bunch of things. But here, we're going to focus on brewing, because other than buying good quality coffee, which we'll get to at the end of this video, it's what we coffee drinkers have the most control over. And the secret to great brewing is proper extraction. What is extraction? So glad you asked. No matter how you brew your coffee, you're using water to dissolve compounds out of the coffee beans and into your cup. That process is called extraction. About 30% of what makes up coffee beans is soluble, or dissolvable, in water. So when you brew coffee, you're going to extract somewhere between 0%, none of that soluble stuff, and 30 or so percent, all of it. Now, I kind of assumed that you'd want to extract everything possible from the beans, the grounds really, to wring out every drop of deliciousness. But that's not actually what you should go for. That's because great tasting coffee has a particular combination of those soluble compounds. And if you understand how extraction happens, you can brew your coffee in a way that extracts stuff you want and not the stuff you don't. Quick note though, there are more than 2,000 different components in a coffee bean that could potentially end up in your cup. So extraction is complicated. And in order to really understand it, you've got to have a relatively firm grasp of chemistry and how likely reactions are to occur. I am not going to dive quite that deep here. You're welcome to nerd out further on your own. But I am going to give you a basic idea of how extraction of a few of the major players proceeds. Acids tend to be extracted from grounds very quickly. Sugars and aromatics peak a bit later, and bitter compounds tend to take the longest. To get an idea of why that matters, let's look at a cup of coffee in which you've only extracted a small percentage of the stuff from your beans. You'll have extracted a lot of the acids, since those dissolve really quickly into water. Acids are a good thing in coffee. They're what give it a bright, sparkly taste. But in order to taste balanced, they need to be accompanied by sugars, and sugars take longer to dissolve out of the beans. Without enough extraction, you'll miss those, and your coffee will taste sour. Experts call coffee like this under-extracted. Now, let's see what happens if you go for maximum extraction. If you extract as much stuff as you can out of your beans, you will get those nice acids and sugars, as well as a lot of lovely aromatics. But you're also going to get a lot of bitter compounds, which tend to be extracted late in the game. And if you've seen our video on bitterness, you know that bitter compounds can be really overpowering. This is known as over-extracted coffee. Where you probably want to be is in the middle, in coffee's Goldilocks zone. This is the sweet spot where you'll get those acids for brightness, those sugars for balance, all sorts of great aromatic flavors, and just a touch of bitterness for a little edge. If this sounds like the coffee you're making and you like it, keep doing what you're doing. But if not, or if you prefer coffee that's outside the Goldilocks zone, which some people do, understanding the extraction process can help you get where you want to be. If your coffee tastes sour, it's probably under-extracted. Too bitter? Over-extracted. A quick caveat here, which I didn't know before making this video, is that a lot of people actually confuse acidity for bitterness. So even if you think you know the difference, lick a lemon, then a Nintendo Switch cartridge to confirm. Seriously. Okay, so once you know where your coffee lies on this set of curves, how do you tweak it to get your ideal cup? Well, all sorts of variables affect how much of those soluble compounds get extracted from the beans during brewing, and you can tweak any of them. The most obvious is brewing time. The longer the water is in contact with the grounds, the more of those compounds it'll be able to dissolve out of them. So the longer you brew, the farther down this set of extraction curves your coffee will be. Then there's the temperature of the water you're using. Generally, the hotter your water, the more compounds you'll be able to dissolve, so the further you'll move down this graph. But certain compounds, and again, this is complicated chemistry that we're not going to get into, are actually less likely to dissolve in hotter water. This is one of the reasons why hot brewed coffee tastes different from cold brew, even if you've reached about the same level of extraction. There's also the size of the grind. The finer you grind your beans, the farther your coffee will get pushed down this set of curves. Not because there's more surface area to dissolve compounds out of, which is what I initially assumed, but because the smaller the particles, the more slowly the water flows through them. In other words, the longer brewing the coffee actually takes. And we already know what longer brewing times do. Finally, there's how much coffee you're using. I've always thought about the coffee-to-water ratio as only mattering in terms of the strength of the resulting cup, but it also affects extraction. That's because once the water is saturated with dissolved stuff from the beans, extraction slows down. In other words, the less water you use per certain amount of coffee, the less extraction you'll get. The more water you use, the more extraction you'll get. So let's put it all together. And remember, this is a simplified take in the hopes of making this info accessible to the people that need it. If your coffee tastes too sour, you want to increase extraction. Try longer brew times, higher water temps, a finer grind, or a lower coffee-to-water ratio. If it tastes too bitter, you want less extraction. Try shorter brew times, lower temps, a coarser grind, or a higher coffee-to-water ratio. Here are some good starting points based on expertise from a bunch of awesome coffee nerds out there. But remember, feel free to tweak. Note that you may be limited by your setup. Like with my drip coffee maker, the brewing temperature and time are fixed, so I'd have to tweak the grind size or the ratio. If you're a French press or pour-over kind of person, you'll have more variables to tweak. If you're not a coffee person, first, congrats on making it to basically the end of this video. And second, you are not leaving empty-handed, because extraction of tea leaves follows a somewhat similar progression. Not only does tea also have a Goldilocks zone, you can also adjust basically the same variables to tweak the extraction until you find a cup of tea that is, well, your cup of tea. I promised we'd get back to the issue of high-quality coffee, and I'm not one to break a promise, especially one about coffee. If you want great coffee that you can feel great about, try the Awesome Coffee Club, which sponsored this video, but which I'm also a huge personal fan of. First, because it's really good. You can choose from whatever roast size and format you prefer. Second, it's good for the planet. It's sourced directly from farmers and collectives that use methods geared toward reducing deforestation and increasing biodiversity. And third, it's good for people. The Awesome Coffee Club pays higher than market rates for their beans in order to fairly compensate workers along every step of the way. And as if that wasn't enough, every cent of profit is donated toward efforts to reduce childhood and maternal mortality in Sierra Leone. So if you live in the US or Canada, give the Awesome Coffee Club a try. Get started at the link on screen and in the description. With that link, you get 25% off your coffee subscription, as well as any other purchases you make at the Good Store. And you'll get delicious, responsibly sourced coffee delivered right to your door as often as you choose. So drink up with Minute Food and the Awesome Coffee Club.